My boyfriend said, "If you can't handle me cheating, maybe you should leave." The apartment was mine. My name was the only one on the lease. So while he left for another business trip with his ex, I packed everything he owned, changed the locks, and let him come home to reality. My name is Naomi Carter. I'm 29 years old, and until last Tuesday, I genuinely believed I was building a future with a man who loved me honestly. Not perfectly. Nobody loves perfectly forever. But I thought what we had was real, stable, safe in the quiet, ordinary way adult relationships are supposed to become after enough time passes. That illusion collapsed 3 seconds after I picked up Evan's iPad off my couch. We'd been together for 2 years and 4 months. He moved into my apartment a little over a year ago. My apartment. I need to emphasize that because it became the center of everything afterward. I'd lived there for 5 years before Evan ever walked through the door carrying boxes and promising me we were building a life together. My name was the only one on the lease. The rent came directly out of my account every month without fail. Evan contributed at first, $600 toward groceries and utilities. But over time, the payments became inconsistent in the slow, slippery way bad habits usually begin. At first, it was work stress, then unexpected expenses, then another delayed reimbursement that somehow became my problem too. His car payment hitting at the wrong time. None of it felt serious enough to fight over individually, and that's how emotional erosion usually works. Looking back now, I think the relationship started ending long before the cheating. I just kept ignoring smaller things because losing him felt scarier than disappointing myself. The iPad was sitting beside one of those decorative pillows Evan insisted made the apartment feel warmer. I picked it up to move it before sitting down, and a notification lit up the screen. The preview alone was enough to make my stomach tighten. A woman's name appeared beside a hotel reference, and one sentence that changed the atmosphere in the room instantly. Last weekend was worth every lie. I opened the messages. I know some people pretend moral purity survives betrayal, but I read everything. 3 months of conversations unfolded in front of me. Photos, hotel confirmations, flirtation, plans for future weekends together. Intimate jokes that sounded painfully comfortable. The worst part wasn't even the cheating itself. It was how easy he sounded with her. Light, excited, present in a way he hadn't been with me for months. There were messages sent while he sat beside me on the couch, asking what I wanted for dinner. Messages sent while I was asleep in our bed. Messages sent minutes after kissing me goodbye before work. Then I found references to his business trips. 4 trips in 3 months. I had driven him to the airport twice myself. Except he never boarded a plane. The messages explained everything. He parked at long-term parking, left his car there, then took ride shares to hotels where she was waiting for him. I sat there for nearly 2 hours reading until the light outside my windows turned deep blue. Afterward, I stayed on the couch, staring into nothing, trying to understand how someone could slowly dismantle your trust while still remembering how you take your coffee in the morning. By the time Evan came home from work, I was no longer crying. I think that unsettled him more than anger would have. He loosened his tie as he walked through the door, glanced toward me in the living room, then frowned immediately. "What's wrong?" I held up the iPad. That tiny shift in his face told me everything before he even spoke. Not guilt, not shame, irritation. Like I'd interrupted a situation he wasn't emotionally prepared to manage yet. "How long?" I asked. He dropped his keys onto the counter and exhaled slowly. "Naomi?" "How long?" "A few months." "A few months?" Like shortening the wording somehow made betrayal feel smaller. I asked if he loved her. Evan rubbed his forehead like the conversation itself was exhausting him. "It just happened." I laughed before I could stop myself. Not because it was funny, but because hearing someone describe 3 months of lies, hotel rooms, fake work trips, and calculated deception as something that just happened made reality feel briefly ridiculous. I told him we were done. Simple, final, calm. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. And leaning against my kitchen counter like we were negotiating something minor, he said, "I'm not going anywhere, Naomi. I like this apartment." For a second, I genuinely thought he was joking. "My apartment," I corrected quietly. "I live here too." "You lived here because I allowed it." His expression hardened slightly. "I have rights. You're not on the lease. I've been here over a year." Then came the sentence that burned itself into my memory permanently. "If you can't handle this, maybe you should leave for a while." The audacity of it cleared the heartbreak out of my body so quickly, it almost felt medicinal. He cheated on me in my home while I paid most of the bills, and now he was suggesting I leave because he liked living there. I asked where he planned on staying that weekend. Business trip, he said without hesitation. Another fake trip, another hotel, another weekend with the woman he'd been sleeping with behind my back. Then somehow he looked me directly in the eyes and suggested therapy when he got back. Then, after admitting he was spending the weekend with another woman, he actually suggested therapy, like our relationship was still salvageable. A version of me from years earlier probably would have screamed, thrown something, begged for honesty. But standing there in that apartment, listening to him casually reorganize morality around his comfort, something inside me went cold in a way that felt strangely clarifying. I nodded once. Okay, I said softly. His shoulders relaxed immediately. He thought I was surrendering. I'll start packing. He smiled like he'd won. Good, he said. I think that's the mature choice. Friday morning, he kissed my cheek before leaving like we were still normal. Like he hadn't detonated our relationship and then attempted to push me out of my own home afterward. I stood at the window, watching his Uber disappear down the street. Then I locked the apartment door behind him and started packing his things first. People imagine revenge as something explosive, screaming matches, broken plates, clothes thrown into the rain while neighbors film videos from balconies. Real anger can look much quieter than that. Sometimes it looks organized. That Friday morning, after Evan left for another fake business trip, the apartment felt emotionally hollow in a way I still struggle to describe. I made coffee and forgot to drink it while I stared around the living room, noticing traces of him everywhere. The headphones near the television, the shoes by the door, the blanket he always stole first during movies. After betrayal, ordinary objects stop feeling ordinary. They start feeling contaminated by memory. I called my landlord around noon. Richard had owned this building for years. Divorced, practical, permanently tired-looking. He answered on the second ring. Naomi, everything all right? I almost lied automatically. Instead, I asked about tenant rights. I explained the situation carefully. Relationship over. Boyfriend refusing to leave despite never being added to the lease. Richard listened quietly the entire time before asking about utilities, official mail, and lease documentation. When I confirmed everything was solely in my name, he sighed. He doesn't legally live there, Naomi. I didn't realize how badly I needed another person to say that out loud until my chest physically loosened afterward. Richard chose his next words carefully. I can't officially advise you to throw him out, but unofficially, you're within your rights to remove someone who never established legal residency. Then, softer. Don't let him bully you out of your own home. That sentence stayed with me because it forced me to recognize something painful. Evan genuinely believed I would keep compromising even after discovering the affair. He had watched me accommodate his moods, his financial inconsistency, his emotional distance for so long that he mistook patience for permanent weakness. I started packing in the bedroom, his clothes first. Then the drawers, the watches I'd once bought him as gifts, the gray sweater he'd pointed out in a store window last winter before I surprised him with it for Christmas. I folded everything carefully because I didn't want destruction. I wanted separation. There's an emotional difference between the two. Halfway through packing, I found one of my old hoodies shoved into the back of his dresser. The sight of it hit me harder than expected because suddenly I remembered him wearing it months earlier while making pasta in the kitchen and dancing badly just to make me laugh after a terrible day at work. That's what makes betrayal so psychologically confusing. Your mind keeps holding two versions of the same person simultaneously. The man who cheated on you in hotel rooms, and the man who once stayed awake all night comforting you through grief. By Saturday morning, the living room looked like a moving company warehouse. 17 boxes, 3 suitcases, garbage bags full of clothes stacked neatly beside the wall. Then I called a locksmith. The man arrived around noon, glanced at the boxes, and immediately understood the situation without asking many questions. Break up, he said while replacing the deadbolt. Something like that. He nodded knowingly. I do a lot of these. For some reason, hearing that affected me more than expected. It reminded me that heartbreak feels world-ending while you're inside it, but somewhere else, another person is crying in a parking lot, changing locks, dividing furniture, realizing love ended 3 weeks before the breakup conversation even happened. The new locks cost $340. Worth every cent. Saturday evening, I carried all of Evan's belongings into the hallway outside the apartment. I placed everything neatly against the wall so nothing would get damaged or block the corridor. I wasn't trying to destroy his life. I was reclaiming mine. Then I sent him a text. Your things are outside. The locks are changed. Do not come back expecting to stay here. 6 hours passed before he responded. This isn't funny. That word alone told me he still didn't understand the situation. He thought this was temporary emotion. Negotiation. A dramatic phase I'd eventually calm down from. You told me to start packing, I replied. I did. The typing bubble appeared instantly. You can't do this. I already did. I have rights. You had privileges. Those aren't the same thing. 20 minutes later, I'm calling the police. Go ahead. And he actually did. Sunday afternoon, 2 officers knocked on my door. I showed them the lease, utility bills, text messages, and explained everything calmly. One of the officers listened quietly before sighing. This is a civil matter, he said. Legally, the apartment belongs to you. No dramatic courtroom moment, no screaming, just reality. About 2 hours later, Evan showed up. I watched through the peephole while he stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the boxes, like consequences had arrived in a language he couldn't read. Then he started pounding on the door. Naomi! I stayed silent. You can't do this to me. The irony almost exhausted me. He kept yelling about rights and fairness while dragging 3 months of lies behind every sentence. A neighbor eventually stepped into the hallway asking him to calm down, and hearing the aggression in Evan's voice when he snapped at him made something inside me settle permanently. This wasn't the first time he'd tried overpowering me emotionally. It was just the first time I stopped accommodating it. Eventually, he started carrying everything toward the parking garage himself. Box after box, trip after trip. The same man who told me to leave my own apartment now hauling his life out of it alone. Near the end, I noticed he was crying, and for one dangerous second, my heart softened. Grief doesn't disappear immediately, just because betrayal arrives. Love leaves slowly, sometimes painfully slowly. But then I remembered the messages, the lies, the arrogance in his voice when he suggested I move out because he liked my apartment. The softness disappeared again. By sunset, the hallway was empty. For the first time in over a year, the apartment belonged completely to me again. I wanted that to be the ending. In my head, the story should have closed there. He cheated. I found out. I took my apartment back. He left. Instead, things escalated. Monday morning, building management called while I was answering emails at work. Naomi, the leasing manager, sighed immediately. Your ex-boyfriend is downstairs. Apparently, Evan had gone straight to the office demanding they let him back into the apartment, claiming illegal eviction, claiming residency, claiming he had nowhere to go. Evan never lied in ways dramatic enough to shock people immediately. He just kept leaving out the parts that made him look bad. Yes, he'd been locked out. No, he wouldn't mention the affair. Yes, he had nowhere to stay. No, he wouldn't mention spending the previous 3 months in hotel rooms with another woman. The manager sounded exhausted. We explained again that he isn't on the lease. He's demanding your spare key. He doesn't have one anymore. We know. I asked if he was causing a scene. A little. Before hanging up, she lowered her voice slightly. For what it's worth, everyone here's on your side. That affected me more than I expected. Betrayal isolates you emotionally even when you know you're right. Some small part of your brain still fears becoming the villain in somebody else's version of events. Tuesday afternoon, Evan showed up at my office. That angered me more than the cheating itself somehow. Work had always been sacred to me, separate from personal chaos, stable, professional. I worked for an architectural engineering firm downtown. Badge access, security desk, glass elevators, the kind of place where everyone lowered their voices automatically during conflict. Reception called my extension around 1:30. There's a man here asking for you. My stomach dropped immediately. He says he's family and there's an emergency. Of course he did. By the time I reached the lobby, security was already escorting him toward the exit. He looked polished, as always. Expensive coat, perfect haircut. The appearance of a successful, emotionally stable man unraveling publicly because he lost access to his ex-girlfriend's apartment. The moment he saw me, anger replaced everything else in his face. You're really doing this? You came to my workplace. You ignored my calls. We're broken up. You can't erase me from your life because you're emotional. That sentence changed how I saw our entire relationship. Because in Evan's mind, my boundaries were the irrational thing happening here. Not the affair, not the deception, my refusal to absorb it quietly. I realized then that he never considered his actions unforgivable. He considered them manageable, something I was supposed to endure while preserving his comfort. Security escorted him outside while employees throughout the lobby pretended not to stare. Later that afternoon, my supervisor quietly asked if everything was all right. I gave him the shortest version possible. Bad breakup. Boundary issues. Won't happen again. He nodded once. I trust you. Just take care of yourself. The kindness in his voice nearly broke me. That night, the messages started from a new number. You humiliated me. I slept in my car because I refused to stay with my parents. You ruined my life. Some were angry, some pleading, some manipulative enough to make my skin crawl. My favorite blamed me for Claire ending their relationship because of all this drama. I screenshotted everything and blocked the number. The next day, his mother called, demanding I let him back into the apartment because he had nowhere else to go. I reminded her calmly that her son cheated on me for 3 months. Relationships are complicated, she said immediately. No, betrayal is complicated for the person committing it. For the person being lied to, it becomes painfully simple once the truth finally arrives. Then came the social media posts. Facebook first, Instagram next. Then TikTok captions describing survival, emotional abuse, and escaping toxic environments. Reading those accusations felt physically surreal. Not because I feared legal consequences, because I realized Evan was trying to rewrite reality itself. The comments filled quickly with sympathy. Mutual friends, coworkers, strangers congratulating him for escaping. False narratives become dangerous because they stop belonging entirely to the people involved. Other people absorb them, repeat them, reshape them into memories. That terrified me. Friday morning, I received a handwritten letter from Evan. 3 pages of manipulation disguised as vulnerability. He apologized for how things escalated instead of apologizing for cheating. He described himself as confused, emotionally lost, misunderstood. Then came the line that made me physically set the letter down. I know you still love me. You wouldn't be this angry if you didn't. Buried inside that sentence was something deeply unsettling. He genuinely believed my heartbreak existed as proof of his importance rather than proof of the damage he caused. The letter ended with him asking if he could move back temporarily until things settled. As if the problem was inconvenience. That same afternoon, Claire called me, the other woman. Her voice sounded exhausted before she even introduced herself. She told me Evan had been staying with her since getting locked out and had started describing me online as emotionally abusive. Apparently, he'd told her I monitored him constantly, exploded emotionally, and forced him out over one mistake. 3 months. Hotel rooms. Lies. Reduced to one mistake. Claire admitted the more he talked, the less his story made sense. Hearing that affected me strangely because for the first time since this nightmare started, someone else inside the situation had begun seeing the cracks too. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer named Diane Mercer. I brought screenshots, messages, the lease, social media posts, and the handwritten letter. She read everything carefully before finally looking at me and saying something I desperately needed to hear. You are not overreacting. I almost cried from relief. Not because the words were dramatic, but because manipulation slowly forces the injured person to analyze their own reactions more than the betrayal itself. The cease and desist letter went out Monday morning. Professional, precise, documented. It outlined the harassment, false accusations, workplace incident, and ongoing attempts to contact me. It also mentioned that if the accusations continued, witnesses, clear name, including Claire, could be subpoenaed. By Wednesday, every social media post disappeared. No apology. No explanation. Just gone. But screenshots survive forever. One of our mutual friends, Julia, reached out afterward asking to meet. She admitted immediately that she never fully believed Evan's version because the emotional math didn't add up. He described you like some unstable monster, she told me over drinks, but you've never even raised your voice at people. Julia had started quietly checking old posts after the breakup exploded publicly. She found hotel photos, suspicious captions, comments from Claire, and eventually a mirror reflection in one of Evan's fake conference pictures, revealing Claire standing beside him months earlier. Truth rarely collapses lies dramatically. Usually it leaks through tiny, careless details until the entire structure weakens. Julia never made a public call-out post. Instead, she spoke privately with mutual friends one by one, calmly sharing the evidence. Within 2 weeks, everything shifted. Coworkers stopped interacting with Evan online. Friends distanced themselves. Several people apologized to me directly for believing him. Claire ended things permanently after learning she could become involved legally. Apparently, she told him she didn't sign up for this level of chaos. Neither had I. Richard called one afternoon to tell me Evan attempted entering the building again, claiming he left something valuable inside the apartment. Security turned him away immediately. Then Richard admitted something unexpected. Nobody here liked him, Naomi. Apparently, Evan had spent the last year talking down to maintenance staff, complaining constantly, acting superior toward everyone in the building. That conversation embarrassed me more than the cheating somehow because it forced me to confront how gradually love had softened my standards. By the second week after the breakup, the apartment finally began feeling like mine again. I rearranged furniture, bought a new rug, opened windows more often. Healing started physically before it arrived emotionally. One night, while cleaning drawers, I found one of Evan's old t-shirts hidden behind extra blankets. Holding it hurt more than the screaming or social media posts ever did, because it represented ordinary intimacy, laundry mixed together, lazy Sundays, routines you build with someone while believing permanence is guaranteed. That was when I realized I didn't actually miss Evan anymore. I missed the future I thought we were building. 3 weeks later, I found the final trace of him in the apartment, a black hair tie in the back corner of a bathroom drawer. That tiny object affected me more than expected because suddenly I understood something important. Eventually, even the person who once felt impossible to lose starts feeling like someone you used to know. Not legendary, not evil, just another flawed human being who made selfish choices. I threw the hair tie into the trash and stood there looking at the closed lid longer than necessary. That moment felt more final than the breakup itself. Closure didn't arrive during the hallway screaming or the lock change. It arrived quietly inside the realization that I no longer needed answers from him. A few days later, Julia invited me out with friends. For weeks, my entire emotional world revolved around surviving betrayal, but sitting there listening to people laugh at dumb stories while music played too loudly in the background reminded me the rest of life had continued moving the entire time. That realization comforted me more than I expected. Pain feels permanent while you're staring directly at it every day, but eventually, life distracts you back into participation in one ordinary moment at a time. Work normalized too. The gossip faded. My supervisor eventually told me I seemed lighter lately. He was right. Not happier yet. Healing and happiness aren't always the same thing in the beginning. But lighter. Like I'd finally stopped carrying someone who expected my love to function as endless emotional accommodation. A month after the breakup, Evan emailed me one final time. "Can we talk?" I stared at the subject line for a long time without opening it. Then I deleted the email unread, because by then I finally understood something important. Closure is not something the person who hurt you can hand back afterward. Most explanations are just self-defense wrapped in softer language. The apartment feels different now. Not because the furniture changed, because I changed inside it. I sleep through the night again. I cook without resentment sitting in my chest. I stop checking the locks twice before bed. Sometimes I still think about the version of Evan I loved, the man who brought me soup when I got sick, held my hand at my grandmother's funeral, stayed awake helping me rehearse presentations when I was nervous. I don't think all of those moments were fake. That's what makes betrayal complicated. Someone can love you sincerely in certain moments and still destroy you in others. Human beings are contradictory enough for both things to exist at once. Understanding that helped me heal more than turning him into a monster ever could. Because if terrible people were obviously terrible from the beginning, heartbreak would actually be easy. What destroys you emotionally is realizing tenderness and selfishness can live inside the same person at the same time. But I recovered anyway. Not perfectly, not instantly. Enough to breathe normally in my own apartment again. Enough to stop replaying the messages every night. Enough to understand that protecting myself did not make me cruel. I didn't destroy Evan's belongings. I didn't try ruining his career. I didn't publicly humiliate him. I simply refused to abandon myself just to make him comfortable after he betrayed me. And honestly, I'm proud of that now. If he had apologized sincerely and left quietly, I probably would have remembered him sadly. Instead, he turned himself into a cautionary story about entitlement, manipulation, and the moment someone mistakes patience for permanent permission. The apartment is still mine. The locks still work. The plants near the windows are somehow still alive. And me? I'm going to be fine.